Awesome. Welcome everyone to Orcodev's call 232. Um, Today we have a few topics around the ongoing preparation for Glamsterdam and then looking forward to Hegota and the headline selection there. Let's start with Glamsterdam, DevNet updates. I think, Stefan, you could give us some
Hey,
updates on BAL DevNet 2 and 3?
yes, can you hear me? So
Yes.
for DevNet 2, it's been going pretty well. I think only Aragon is left to get ready and start proposing some blocks, but they've been doing some work on fixing some syncing issues, and they should be ready soon, proposing blocks on DevNet 2. We've also got further with the efforts to get some benchmarking ready on DevNet 2, and any benchmarking effort has been done against DevNet 2 so far. We've started dedicated nodes so that we can compare three different approaches. There is the all optimizations of BAL, then there is sequential, which is no optimizations of BAL, but still with any optimizations that the clients have inherently. And then there is no prefetch. So with BAL, there's the concept of prefetching the state through the block level access list before executing in parallel. And we wanted to see in the block level access list if reading all the state in the beginning is actually speed up or not. And there we see a little bit of mixed results, but it's just the average case. So we haven't been testing the worst case yet. So far we see that without prefetch, it's currently faster than with it. That's for DevNet 2, unless there's anything else for DevNet 2. If not, I would move on to DevNet 3. So I've been testing a lot on kurtosis, and it seems that most clients are not ready yet for especially 837. There are still some issues that clients are resolving, and a recent test release was made by Spencer 5.4, and it would be good if all clients could test and see that they are passing as many tests as possible. Yeah, and I think that's pretty much the status for DevNet 3. We haven't started it yet. And there's a point from Marius, so I would pass on back.
Sounds good, Marius.
Or no, it wasn't Marius, it was
Oh, ah,
Eber. No, someone else has a
yes,
point on.
right,
Sorry.
right, right. Exactly. No, no worries. I saw this. So basically, I think there is some concerns around EIP 8037. I heard this already that clients in general were saying that it's a bit more complex than initially thought. For context, of course, we do need an approach to state growth. If we do not end up addressing state growth at all in Amsterdam, we can't make use of all of the scaling benefits in the fork. So in some ways, it's kind of without alternative, but of course, the specific version of it is with alternative. And so there are concerns whether the current shape of 8037 really is the thing we should or can do. Andrew, do you want to give a bit of an overview of your concerns, your team's concerns?
Yes, sure. So, as I wrote, now we have like four flavors of gas. Uh, so 4844 introduces blob gas, then 7928 introduces this like state gas accounting versus non-state gas accounting. 7778 introduces block accounting versus user refund accounting, and the 8037 introduces state versus regular gas. And each of all of those changes in isolation, they make sense. But if you look at all of them together, like they end up in a horrible mess because they are not aligned with each other. So if if we are keeping 8037 or something similar in Amsterdam, then I think we should take a step back and make make the gas changes coherent on the protocol level. So say how I see it, if you look at BIOS 3928, they say, okay, you have a guess validation before state access and like pre-state, like pre-state validation and post-state validation, right? And then 8037 talks about state versus regular guess. I think that we should just bite the bullet and do it coherently and say, okay, now gas is three-dimensional. The dimensions are blob gas, state gas, and computational gas. When like 7928 and 8037 talk about state gas, they should talk about exactly the same state gas, right? So we should refactor both 7928 and 8037 like to use exactly the same thing, the state gas. And then we should also like we should either drop 7778 or make it like maybe we should drop refunds entirely, rethink 77, 78, or just double check that if we introduce this more or less coherent three-dimensional gas, that 77, 78 is still fine. Because if we don't do that, if we just add all those kind of independent hacks all together, then we end up in a horrible mess like we are now with a gazillion of corner cases. Things are incoherent, illogical, or kind of you need to think about. It's just very hard or impossible to think logically about what gas is now in Ethereum. So if we don't do this coherent approach, then we'll end up with a lot of technical debt.
Yeah, we have a few people with hands up. Maria?
So I just wanted to speak a little bit to the more principled approach. The way I see it is, I think we've been using gas for two different uses so far in DVM. So on one hand, we use gas for transaction pricing, so to decide how much a user should pay for things. But we are also using it to control resource abuses through the block limit. So we want to make sure that execution doesn't take more than a certain amount of seconds and that state doesn't grow at more than a certain rate. And because we are using the same thing for these two things, we end up in a non-optimized approach. So I think one principal way that we should look at it is these are two different things. And so when we talk about transaction gas use, this is an inherently different thing from the block limit and block metering. So we should probably even have like these two different concepts. We have transaction gas use and we have block metering, block gas metering. So this is, and I think some of the confusion around 8037 is that now we are actually needing to make these specifics on what do we mean by the gas used in a block and what we mean by the gas used in the transaction. So this is like the axis number one, like these two things need to be separate. The other axis is on the resources side. And I think the long-term principal approach is as was said, which is like we need to separate the resources if we want to have a better control over them. And I think the end goal for that would be something like 7999, where we are actually have like a separate fee market for each resource. And I think 8037 is compatible with 7999, and it's already implementing a lot of the things that we would need to then have 7999. And so the way I see it, I think is like 8037 is a step in the direction of the end principled approach. So that's how I see it, and it's also a needed thing we need now if we want to continue to scale without having state grow at the unmanageable rate.
Felix?
Yeah, thank you. I just wanted to quickly give the feedback from the implementer point of view. I was recently also debugging something related with this EEP, and the primary issue that we see right now is things like, for example, how is the reverts being handled? Like, how is the gas correctly attributed back to parent frames in these scenarios? And it took us a long time to figure out the correct semantics. And I'm pretty sure that there's more cases like this. So it seems the bug potential of this EEP is very high. Doesn't mean the idea of it is bad. It's just, I think what Andrew is also kind of trying to say here is that it just intuitively feels like something that is super easy to get wrong. And yeah, I just really wanted to voice it that like from an implementer perspective, it's kind of complicated.
And Andrew?
Yeah, so I think it's yeah, right now we are reaching this level of complexity that we need the principal approach now. So I'm very uncomfortable with implementing and shipping 8037 without a principal approach. So it's either has to be refactored with a principled approach, and that principled approach should be also applied to 3928, 7778, and also blob gas should be should be consistent with the principled approach, or we should not ship it at all. Otherwise, yeah, if we just ship it without a principled approach, it will be very bug prone, error prone.
And Dragon?
I think the state gas is very much needed if you want any bigger blocks. It is complex change because it touches the gas, and everything that touches gas is very sensitive. There's a lot of edge cases there. I do think that there was a moving target regarding this AIP. There was a lot of cases that were not covered. The example of how to return or revert to the halt the reservoir was something that we talked 2 weeks ago, and the tests are currently needs to be polished a little bit because they are just made now. So I think it's a little bit chaotic because it's not, we are just coming to the place where the AIP is polished. So in my opinion, we should add it, we should bite the bullet and just implement it. It will get better.
Yeah, I mean, from my side, I wrote some of this in chat. I think a full rework of gas and basically trying to move towards a principled integrated approach to gas in all ways, I think is, to me at least, infeasible for Glamsterdam, just because I think this is something that already in the background people have been thinking about. It's just a really kind of complex thing to get right. That leaves us, I think, with the question of specifically on this kind of state creation side, can we either A, make some adjustments to 8037 that make it easier to implement, or maybe just bigger changes in principle that really kind of reduce complexity on this topic in particular. I personally have a hard time seeing us making that final decision today, just because I think it was a kind of very short-term, short notice raised concern, and it's a consequential decision. So I'd rather than say schedule a breakout call for something like next week to really dive in it on that call, then make decisions. I do wonder if we were to say today that we need changes, where that would leave us with regards to BAL DevNet 3. Whether we would say we would still go ahead with 8037 as is, just to get it out the door and then maybe have some more insights on how it behaves, or whether to then hold off the DevNet until we've decided what to do about it. I don't know if people have thoughts on this question. Also, Maria?
I was just going to add that we do have a repricing breakout next Wednesday. So I think that could be a good opportunity. Andrew, if you could come to dive deep into, in your opinion, what changes could be made to make it work better with the other EIPs. I think like doing the full principled approach might not be possible because that would mean like adding all the resources we want, thinking about what about the ZKVM. So I don't think we'll do like the full thing, but trying to make it less prone to edge cases and errors. I think it's a good aim, and so I'll be happy to have more in-depth discussion on this.
Ben?
Um, the question, a lot of some of the complication comes from like tracking refunds and things. And we could go back to the question, do we just drop refunds? Is the benefit that they bring more valuable than the complexity they're causing?
So I think the problem that or that why refunds are a bit complicated with this is because we are the current rule is that we are refunding the state gas to the state gas reservoir. If we would just refund the gas or if we had the same logic for the state gas as for normal gas, then it would be significantly easier to implement. The logic behind refunding to the state gas reservoir is that, hey, you didn't use up the state gas because you are not changing anything. So you are being refunded that gas. But if we just say, hey, the state gas is handled the same way that the regular gas is handled, then we can pretty significantly simplify things. But I also don't think it is that complicated. Like the first implementation I had of it was pretty complicated, but I've been refactoring it, and the only thing that was pretty ugly about it was the thing that we just changed with the recent DAL release. Otherwise, it is pretty straightforward, to be honest. As when you are in this, when you are like when you are thinking about this, it's not that complex, to be honest.
Yeah, I mean refunds altogether. So we have the one that tracks how much has been used in the block versus how much, there's the separation of here's the refunded gas in the transaction, but here's how much resource the block has actually used, less the refund. So there was like EIP 3298, where it was like get rid of refunds altogether. So the question is, the refund incentive, is it that strong that people are deleting state? Or is it not?
Maybe I have some clarification here. In Arriva implementation, we don't touch refund at all. The refilling of the state gas or reservoir with the state gas that's not used is like a different variable. So dropping refunds doesn't like touch the refunds in general. The constants around that is not touching the state gas or reservoir at all. So it's like totally separate. In that part, it's like it became very simple. Propagating reservoir and coming back from the subcalls, it's simple logic. The problem that I had mostly is about merging that inside before execution and after execution of the section. So I don't think the dropping refund is going to solve anything around that.
Right. I do think, yeah, again, it seems unlikely to me that we will be able to make a decision today, but it seems like an important topic because if indeed the feeling is that also say, for example, from the testing side, I mean, maybe do we have someone from the testing side who could briefly, like maybe Mario or someone who could briefly speak up on what the latest feeling is around testing complexity of 8037 in particular? Um,
I think Spencer has more context, but I can give the overview that, well, at least my feeling is that it does break a lot of tests. I think it's very complex in the testing side, but only because, I mean, primarily because the static tests are not ready for this kind of changes, but we are in the process of converting this. The problem is that this is 10 years of tests, so it's not easy. And we've been meaning to do this for a long time, and I think 8037 is like pushing us to just get it done. Spencer, do you have other comments?
Yeah, it is tricky, and I mean, where the tests are right now, like at least in the most recent release, we don't have all the tests from the previous works in the most recent release. For Baldev DevNet 3, we specifically chose to simplify some of the simplify a part of EIP 8037 by essentially hard coding the cost per state byte. So it's already loosely simplified for this DevNet. And my feeling, maybe other clients can speak up here, but my feeling is that we should just go ahead with DevNet 3 as is. And then kind of gauge from there if there's a lot more edge cases that pop up. And yeah, for DevNet 4, we will have a lot better coverage and even more, I guess, specific edge cases for 8037.
One thing is that we have not successfully filled all the tests, so that's something that we have to take into account. I wouldn't feel confident or about signing off this EIP into the fork if we are not passing all the tests. But we can progress about this. I do feel that we have to make sure that none of the tests break, or worse than breaking is that they pass without verifying what they correctly did verify before. So yeah, I think it's gonna take a lot of work from us. But if this is a change that we need, I mean, it's something that we have to do.
Yeah, sounds good. Thank you. That adds good context, I think. Yeah, I agree. I think with the general take that it would be very desirable if we could go ahead with DevNet 3, BalDevNet 3 as is, including 8037 in its current form, if that's at all feasible for clients, just because even if we then still want to consider making changes, I think it would be really good to just also see in practice how well does it work, in the end. And then I would still also like the idea of saying next week's repricing breakout, we specifically focus on the question of kind of 8037 and complexity there, and is there anything we can do? What would be potential alternatives in terms of trying to find ways to simplify? Is this already the best we can do here? Yeah, so to really have people join next week if on that topic. Does that for now seem like a reasonable approach? And then we basically see after next week, basically whether we just stick with it even and just accept the complexity or whether there are things we can do. It feels like that's the best way forward. Do we have, yeah. How do people feel about that? I guess Aragon, for example, would you all be able to basically support BalDevNet 3 in its current form?
Yeah, we are working on it. So yeah, we'll try to make it work. It sounds like a reasonable interim approach, but I think we should at least align 7928 and 8037 in Amsterdam.
Yeah, makes sense. And I think that's the type of topic for
Yeah,
next week, Marius?
I totally agree with that. I also think those are two EIPs that both change the way receipts work, and I think they are specified very differently, and so we should definitely make them.
Sounds good. Then I think for now, that's probably a good place to leave it at and move on. Is there any last comments, anything anyone would definitely still want to bring up on this topic for today? Otherwise, before we get into H-star headliner discussion, which is the main topic for today, just very briefly wanted to ask Barnabas if there's any update regarding EPBS DevNet 0. That's obviously mostly a CL side topic, but I think it's good to just make sure we have visibility on from the EL side as well.
Yeah, sure. So we have a stable-ish DevNet. DevNet 0 launched last week Wednesday, and we've been going on for a whole week. We have a few clients that are working. We have Lighthouse, Lodestar, and Prism working fine. Teku and Nimbus are working hard to get up to head. We have Checkpoint Z working now as well. We have withdrawals working and deposits working. We currently do not have exits working, but it's something that clients are looking into getting fixed, as well as exiting 0x03 builders that is not yet working. We are expecting to have a new consensus spec release by the end of this week, and we are going to either launch DevNet 1 next week, Wednesday, or a week after that. That will be based on top of the latest CL spec release.
Sounds good. Any EL side topics, questions anyone has around this DevNet?
We currently only have Geth as the EL. Ideally, we could have at least one more EL, just in case there's something wrong with Geth. I'm not saying that there will be, but ideally we would have at least two.
Do we have any other EL clients actively working towards like short-term EPBS DevNet 0 readiness? And if so, how close are we there?
I'm not aware of anyone working on it. I think all the EL teams are very busy. So it's like not urgent, but if anyone has a bit of downtime, then let me know and I can point you to it's fairly easy to do, as Mario said.
Sounds good. So open invite if anyone is bored from all the state gas questions and thinks this is trivial and wants a challenge. It sounds like a very small challenge, but from the EL side. But yeah, do reach out to Barnabas. Maybe see if you can join the DevNet. That sounds fun. Okay, perfect. Thank you, Barnabas. Then next up, we do have the Hegota headliner selection. Just as a quick reminder, we kind of already had a discussion last call. The plan is to make a decision today. We basically have the different options that we had were the front runner candidates, so to say, were either to do the frame transaction headliner proposal, or possibly some clients would had the preference of maybe just not having an EL specific headliner, just focus on Fossil as the kind of cross-layer headliner for that fork, and then have smaller features or just lower priority features otherwise on the EL side. But there were also still the candidates of Lucid, the encrypted mempool proposal, and the SSE Pure ETH proposal. Yeah, I would maybe want to start because it seemed to me like last time we were basically saying that both of those SSE and also Lucid only had outside chances, and I just wanted to check in on this first. My understanding was, for example, from the encrypted mempool side, that many people in general are very open to this, but we're feeling that this is one hard fork too early, and that we should probably just revisit this for iStar. And I think I heard from some of the champions as well that they are kind of starting to at least be very open to this, lean in that direction. I don't know, Anders, are you on the call, for example? I think I heard you mention something in that regard.
Yeah, I can just say that, yeah, I mean, if there's no general support for it, we are of course open for sort of recognizing that we can sort of try for iStar if there's if people think that we should not do it for H-star. So it's, yeah, I would say generally we will still like to put it up there for discussion, but yeah, we are definitely open for thinking that maybe it's suitable for iStar.
Sounds good. Yeah, and of course, my feeling is that clients haven't really changed their take on this over the last 2 weeks. But of course, if that is different, then we can discuss it now. I was just thinking we should maybe at the beginning of this discussion section just make the decisions around SSE or Lucid as headliners. Most likely just reject them as H-star headliner candidates, so we have a simplified design space, and then we can just talk about frame transactions versus no headliner. Yeah, do we have anyone here with opinions on either of those two headliners, SSE or um, Lucid, who would, yeah, maybe potentially want to argue against rejecting them now, or of course just confirm this decision? Ben?
Just on SSE, there's been like a recent movement to do a form of some SSE sort of that's not fork related. So I think that might change the topology on that as well. So it doesn't need to be coordinated necessarily through consensus.
Yeah, Daniel?
Yeah, so from business side, we had Lucid as the favorite the last time, but now the team changed actually to no headliner is favorite. So from our side, it also would not be Lucid.
Makes sense. And yeah, just to confirm, I think people are overall quite positive about both of those, SSE and Lucid, for the future of Ethereum. It's just, yeah, maybe not the right form as an H-star headliner. That's at least the feeling that I got from conversations. So then, yeah, like I would just, I mean, let's not do it as a batch decision. People do usually dislike this, so just let's do them one by one. I would propose to just reject SSE as headliner proposal for H-star. And again, that does not mean that we are not considering doing this either out of protocol, in protocol, otherwise, but just not selecting it as a headliner, basically. Anyone who wants to speak up against that decision? Okay, so then we will not do the SSE as a headliner in H-star. And then same proposal for Lucid, basically saying to officially reject it as a headliner candidate. Anyone who wants to speak up against that decision? Okay, so then we also, yeah, reject Lucid as headliner for H-star. And then that indeed leaves us with the decision. We can either accept frame transactions, or we can say we just do not have a separate headliner. I know that there has been quite a bit of discussion. Unfortunately, I was not able to join the breakout call last week. Yes, do we have anyone who could briefly summarize the discussion from the breakout? And then otherwise, yeah, any clients with updated positions on this topic? Felix?
Yeah, I can definitely summarize. I have also for people to, if you are interested, I have posted a longer comment to the ACDE PM issue that summarizes basically everything that we have done on the EAP in the last couple of weeks. Just so, I mean, ever since it was proposed initially, we have made some updates to it, and we've done a lot of research to like see, like we've heard some criticism from various actors. I've just been researching how this can be addressed, or like what is like the wanted feature set from this EAP from the wider community. So this is definitely an ongoing process, but some interesting changes have already happened. And with regard to the breakout call, I'm very happy to say that this was also integrated into the forecast website. So I have actually also put the link to it in my comment. And on the breakout call, mostly it was just addressing people's questions. So there were just a lot of questions of what is the purpose of this EIP, why do account abstraction, what is the connection of account abstraction with post-quantum. We went a little bit again into these discussions of how can post-quantum signatures be achieved within the block. There are some technical nuances that still have to be solved around this area. And then, like I said, I mean, after the breakout call, it became clear that really what's necessary for us as the next step is just to engage way more with the wallet developer community, to just hear what they really want out of this. Like when native account abstraction comes to the mainnet, what do they want to see? And I can just give a very high level comment here that in addition to this being a change that would obviously affect the mainnet, what everyone is also seeing this as is like a chance to generally resolve some user experience issues across the wider network of Ethereum compatible chains. So it is becoming kind of important that once native account abstraction makes it in the mainnet, that it kind of makes it in the same way on the L2s, because this will enable people to use their account on all of these chains in the same way. And facing this wider landscape of having this, making this like work in the multi-chain context, like I said, we started making some changes and started considering all these upgrade paths and like stuff that people already have done in the past. For example, we now are considering an upgrade path for the existing smart accounts, which are using ERC 437 and which people are already using on some of these chains, things like that. Anyway, I highly recommend to read my comment to see all the updates, and that's it.
Sounds good. Thank you. Before we go into the open discussion, and I think, I see Vitalik is also on the call, who's, I think, one of the co-creators of the EIP, but I just briefly wanted to make sure that we have the latest picture of where clients think positions are right now. For example, I think on the last call, there was a comment from Besu that in the absence of Lucid, they would actually prefer doing frame transactions over nothing, but now it sounded like maybe Besu is actually would rather be in favor of no headliner. Is this correct? Just to double check.
Yeah, that's correct.
Sounds, okay, makes sense. And then I think otherwise I had Nethermind and Wrath on the side written down as on the side of preferring no headliner over frame transactions, and Aragon and Geth on the side of the other way around, preferring frame transactions over nothing. Is this still accurate, Ben?
Yeah, so no headliner, but we wouldn't want to say no to frame transactions. We just don't want to put it on the headliner priority where we can't ship the fork if it's not ready. But we'd like it to come in as one of the regular EIPs. So what we did in the previous fork was we said, oh, if it came in as the headliner and was rejected, it's obviously a big thing. So it shouldn't come in as a regular EIP. We don't think that's the case with frame transactions, and so we'd like that to. Lukas can probably.
Yeah, so if I can say something, we would potentially think about working on it and prototyping it and working on the spec, but we are not sure about it yet, so we don't want it as a headliner in that way. So potentially we're not sure if we should commit to it, right? In this way.
Makes sense. Dragan?
From red side, yeah, we are for the no headliners for H star. We don't support frame, as our stance is to introduce additional abstraction layer that we don't need, and something like tempo intersection as the blueprint for the new intersection could be a lot better. It could give us a lot more benefits from and smaller risk from anything. Frame TX in general, we introduce very big lift for TX pool and how DDoS protection is done and handled. It doesn't explain how the things are going to be done, but it introduces additional abstraction layer that allows those things. So directly implementing those end things that we need in some like specific or straightforward way, I think it's going to be a lot more beneficial.
Makes sense. And I think there's a comment by Matt on the mempool side question specifically. But yeah, okay. Sounds good. So then I think we have a picture. So right now we have 3 clients more leaning towards no headliner and 2 clients leaning to or supporting frame transactions, which would, given that I think that doing nothing is also always the default right now, tilt the decision more towards not doing frame transactions as a headliner, and then we could revisit it as an EIP still for the fork. But I do think client opinions on these topics overall are still uncertain enough from what I felt that it seems reasonable to have a discussion here and see if actually people still are in a position to change their mind on this. So yeah, I think this is the main kind of agenda point for today. So I think we have basically the rest of the call if we need it, if we want it for this discussion. With that, do we have people
Sorry,
again?
can I just give you a little bit of extra feedback from an Aragon perspective?
Yes.
Because I think we're more certain about Lucid now than we were, I think, the last time we discussed this, basically because the proposal's firmer. So I think what we want to do, probably from a development perspective, is work on Lucid and frames as a kind of thing that we will coordinate together to get into the code base. Now, I think that's probably because we're in a position where, because we worked on account abstraction before, we've already got effectively frame support in the code base. And one of the things that I think we want to get resolved is Lucid has this composite proposal in it as well as frames, and we don't think it makes sense to have like 2 composite transaction types effectively. So it seems like there needs to be some coordination there. But we basically want to work on both. We think it makes sense to work on both of those things in the kind of Hectare timeframe.
Makes sense. And at least it does seem like if we wanted to do Lucid, I personally think it's unlikely we'll end up doing it as a non-headliner still for H star already, but yeah, definitely one should think there.
Yeah. So I think we're kind of sort of less, we're more neutral on the headliner thing, right? Because it seems like it makes sense from a development point of view, but it seems quite risky. And it's one of those things that if we try to do too much, we might end up not delivering anything, essentially. So while it makes sense to co-develop it, it doesn't necessarily make sense to us to co-deliver it, if that makes sense.
Yeah, that makes sense. And then that would still, at least in principle, be an argument that could still favor having frame transactions as a headliner in H star, and then already like in the development process for it, make sure that it is forward compatible with Lucid or a Lucid variant that we would then bring in iStar.
Yeah,
right?
because what we don't
For
want to do
example.
is do frame transactions and then revisit them for the exact next fork because we're putting Lucid in.
Yeah, that makes sense. But yeah, I think again, I agree. I think what you're saying basically, it's not about shipping them together. It's not about shipping Lucid in HStar still. It's just saying like if we were to select frame transactions to go first, we should make sure that it's already co-developed so that we can make sure that it's seamlessly forward compatible with the later Lucid change.
Yeah,
That
yeah,
makes sense.
that's a good summary.
Yeah, sounds good. Yeah, then in general, thoughts kind of, I do know that there's a few people on here that actually very strongly in favor of frame transactions. I think now would be a good opportunity to speak up, to make the case, see if we can still convince the skeptical clients. Anyone who wants to speak
It
up.
kind of seems that the main concern is that frame transactions are going to delay the next fork. That's what I'm understanding, at least from Nethermind. But I'm wondering if it changes people's opinions, knowing that we can choose how complicated to make the transaction pool. That's one thing. The other thing is that, we still have quite a long time before this fork is going to go live. We're already talking about maybe large changes to Glamsterdam. So we're looking at at least 1 year out before this feature would even go live. Yeah, Ben.
I would go further than just saying delay the fork in that we're positive towards frame transactions, but we're not 100% convinced. So we'd prefer the optionality to say, okay, maybe this doesn't work at some point in the future. Whereas putting it as headliner would suggest that is the fork, if you know what I mean. It's not.
I mean, yeah, if we say it's headliner, but we reserve the right to remove it later if we realize it's not going to work, is that, sufficient to accept it as a headliner? Like, we don't have to tie our hands behind our back with processes and rules if it's going to lead to worse outcomes for Ethereum.
Yeah, but it would be weird messaging to put something as a headliner and then take it out later.
I mean, what you're proposing is also not possible with the process either. Like, if we don't accept it as a headliner, now because it's been proposed as a headliner, then we couldn't accept it as a non-headliner till iStar. I don't know if this is what you're proposing or if you're proposing that we consider it as a non-headliner in HStar.
As a non-headliner in HStar.
Right. So I would just say, if we're going to change the process, we might as well just accept it as a headliner now, with the assumption that we could decide later that we are not going to be able to deliver this, or that there's not enough agreement on what the shape of the thing needs to be. Because if we say it's not a headliner, now we have to wait several more weeks for the non-headliners to come around.
But that's kind of the definition of a headliner is we delay our upgrade. So why would we call it a headliner if we won't delay the upgrade for it? Might as well just not have it as a headliner.
I'm going to speak up now. So I think this has been feedback that I also got from talking to client developers individually, that it just somehow seems like for this, I think the concept of the headliner was introduced so that clients could all commit to a singular goal, which has to be achieved by the fork. And if this basically kind of defines it as being this thing that the fork will be delayed over and that will not be pulled from the fork. So it seems that we cannot currently gather this kind of support for EIP 8141. If everyone was agreeing on it, or the absolute majority of the clients would be agreeing on it right now, that this is the single most important thing we have to achieve within the HStar fork, then we wouldn't have such trouble deciding on it. So this is kind of where this hesitation is coming from, to say, yeah, maybe we should downgrade it to a non-headliner and whatever. I personally am not super attached to the exact process here. for me personally, I feel like it's a good moment in time to introduce native account abstraction. It has been sitting there on the side for a good number of years with people exploring different ideas to bring it there. And we feel that with EIP 8141, it's probably our best shot at it yet, especially regarding the mempool compatibility. Like if you look at the previous account abstraction proposals, the mempool was always the issue. So this time we are really making sure that at least some of the native account abstraction flows can be handled by the public mempool, whereas with previous proposal, it was always clear from the start that, yeah, even if we have native account abstraction, there will just not be a mempool as we know it for these transactions. So I feel like it is better than what was proposed before for this particular topic. And so, yeah, I mean, given that there is no other good candidate for the headliner on the EL, that is like another reason for me to say, yeah, I mean, it's like we might as well do this one. I mean, it is a bit larger change than tweaking gas prices or trying to, I don't know, add some convenience features to the protocol. Like it is a pretty fundamental change to the protocol in many ways. And so that's, for me, this is more important as the headliner. It just has like, it gives a big upgrade to the chain in some ways.
One thing I wanted to also highlight again is that there's a lot of synergies between fossil and native account abstraction, and like those two EIPs are actually quite naturally complementary, basically because what fossil does is it creates very strong rapid inclusion guarantees for transactions, and native account abstraction greatly increases the set of things that can be directly done as transactions. And so if you have those two things together, then it basically means that a very large sets of applications, and including transactions from smart contract wallets, potentially including things that transactions that pay fees and other assets, also including privacy protocols, will be able to be intermediary free across the full stack, meaning they'll be able to no longer need intermediary choke points, both at the layer of getting included into a transaction and at the layer of needing to go through a block builder if block builders become much more dominant. And so I think and this is also a case for treating the two almost as a very interrelated unit to some degree.
Makes sense. Dragan, you have your hand up?
I would say that there is uncertainty or unclarity what exactly is the frame TX, and listening from the Nethermind, Aragon, and basically all the clients, they need more time to evaluate what it's needed because they are uncertain this is the solution that we want to include or not. I think that should be good enough reason to not include it as the headliner. For the frame TX in general, basically our stance is it's too complex, and those things, basically protocols that we want to include to enable all the things that we want to do, it should be natively supported. Because if it's natively supported without that execute EVM abstraction that frame TX now has, it becomes a lot easier to use, it becomes more straightforward, it becomes a lot better. So yeah, I think that's my stance here.
Nico, you're unmuted. Did you want to say something?
Yeah, sorry, I couldn't raise my hand. One thing that I wanted to add is on the timeline question, even if we headline or not even if we ship frame transaction in H star, it's going to be a tight timing for DAOs to upgrade their contract to post-quantum resistant transaction. So we are looking at, in the best scenario, 1 year to ship the EIP. Then on top of that, you need to account for a very messy DAO voting decision, which will take a few months. You need to add to that some audits for the verification schemes. So this brings us to 2028, 2029, or even a bit later with potential delays. So yeah, I just wanted to remind that in this context, it's a bit gamblish to go for something that is not post-quantum. And even if we take the frame transaction and we manage to do everything, it's going to be a race to like ship this in a safe time frame. So by 2029. So yeah, I just wanted to highlight the urgency here because yeah, we have to account for DAOs and we have to account for wallets. So yeah, it's going to take some time to do all this. So
is that
one comment I see in the chat. It's it doesn't solve post quantum directly, but it does enable native solidity verifiers to be the main account. So yes, in a sense, even if it's expensive, it does solve post quantum. Yeah.
Mark, you want to say something?
I was just going to, is that an argument for or against making it a headliner?
It's for, and it's for, it's for making it an headliner and committing to it.
Yeah.
Because basically, if we use it, it's going to be very complicated. And we will be gambling with the PQ timelines, which we really don't want to be doing.
Yeah, I think if we need to reach consensus, we also maybe need to, because it seems like from a RETH perspective, your concern is this the right AA proposal? But I mean, I think the other thing that we need to think about is what happened with 7702, which it's kind of, it was a less than perfect solution on the basis of let's get it in and let's get adoption. And actually, if you look at the history of that, adoption has still been quite slow, although it was put into the protocol quite a long time ago. So that kind of, I think, speaks to what you're saying. It's saying we need to make the change sooner because the adoption process after that is going to be pretty slow anyway. And if we delay it by another year, it's another year of delay, fundamentally.
Yeah, exactly. And just we also need to take into account that it's just not only wallets, it's also DAOs. Like if you were a quantum attacker, what you would attack right now is the governance contract from Aave, and you would redeploy you would update the Aave contract and drain everything. You would not target like random wallets. So the main targets are big governance contracts and stuff, and they take a lot of time to move. So yeah, we need to account for that too.
Thank you. Derek, your hand up?
Yeah, I think I just want to say that I think, since a lot of people are comparing 7702 with frames, I just want to say that I think it's slightly misleading to use the fact that maybe 7702 has lower adoption than some might have hoped, even though like Matt said in the comments, it still has decent adoption. But I think it's slightly misleading to use that as sort of like proof that like maybe A141 will have similarly low adoption, because the thing about 7702 is that it's not actually native AA in any real sense, right? Like 7702 is simply a mechanism to allow EOAs to upgrade to smart contracts, to upgrade to smart contracts. Yeah. But it doesn't actually allow the smart accounts to originate transactions, for example, which is a core goal of native AA. It doesn't give the accounts the ability to have their gas natively sponsored, for example, right? So if you look at how the wallets have actually used 7702, for example, MetaMask, right? They're using 7702, but they cannot actually give their users the ability to have their gas sponsored without relying on application level relayers such as ERC-437 bundlers, right? Whereas firm transactions is actually a full-fledged AA proposal that natively introduces the capability of things like gas sponsorship, transaction batching. So I think firm transactions, I
Yeah,
think,
so
especially with the latest
yeah,
updates
yeah.
to
I was actually making the opposite point. Basically, I think we should do frame transactions and not do another, let's do something simpler.
awesome. Amazing.
So
Yeah, I think some people in the comments seem to be suggesting otherwise, but yes, thanks for clarifying.
Yeah, I'm just saying because I originally brought it up, but my reason for bringing it up was to use it as an example of there's where we did something which wasn't the full solution. Now, actually, I think it's quite good because I think the frame solution is a lot better than the original AA one because it's had time to get developed. But it feels to me like this is the time that we should do it, basically, and not have another conversation and come up with a kind of compromise.
Right. Yeah. I mean, I think, I personally, like frame transactions. I'm not sure how I feel about the headliner situation, but luckily this is not my decision to make. I will just say in terms of purely process, right now I seemingly I only see two clients that would prefer it as headliner, with Geth and Aragon. I think if there was a third client, so if any of say Nethermind, Besu, or Reth would change their minds, I think we would be in a place where we could at least reasonably consider whether we would still want to go ahead with headliner status. I think as long as it's only two clients, I think the default decision here will be to or would be, of course there's still time, but would be to reject it as headliner and then reconsider it as non-headliner. Yeah, so I'm just wondering, out of the three clients that are currently against it, it seems like Reth is pretty locked in on being skeptical. I think also with some background there with the tempo developments. Yeah, I was wondering basically like maybe specifically a question towards Nethermind and Besu. Do the two clients think that they are pretty much locked in on the decision of preferring no headliner for today, or are either of you two still kind of like considering, open to arguments? Yeah, what's the situation there? Daniel?
Yeah, from Bes's side, we had like a ranking, and no headliner was basically the first one, and frame transaction and lucid was a close second. But still, if the majority of the other clients is no headliner, then our decision still stays like this. So there is, for us, I don't think there's a reason for to change that.
And from the Nethermind side?
I don't know. I don't. My personal stance didn't change. I don't know if other people. So.
Right. Yeah, I personally don't. Yeah, sorry, Matt, you seem to be unmuted.
I was just saying, I feel like we're still focusing on the ability to deliver the change, but I don't really understand why we're not accounting for the fact that we can tune how much we're going to deliver with the frame transaction substantially. Like this isn't like most changes where you have to implement every single thing in the EAP to put it on the mainnet, because the consensus changes for the frame transactions are really relatively small. Like ETHREX said they implemented it in just a couple days. The transaction pool is where things get more complicated. Like if we're going to submit, if we're going to support the, paymaster sponsoring, then this is going to be a much larger change than if we added frame transactions to the consensus object, which would allow them to use frame transactions, begin the adoption of frame transactions, and then let clients after the fork continue working on the transaction pool changes without being blocked on a fork.
So to some extent, I actually quite agree, but I read the situation differently. I read it like, okay, we specified the easier part, and the harder part is left unspecified, but please commit to it, right? So that's how I read the room.
I mean, have you read the ERC about how the transaction pool will work?
There's a specified ERC, not the EAP.
Well,
Yeah,
I mean, it's
and we can explain this. So the thing is that the EIP 8141 was developed from EIP 7001, and this EIP was itself developed from ERC 4367. So all of these proposals are coming basically from the same family of proposals related to account abstraction, and as part of the ERC 4337, the Ethereum Foundation account abstraction team has developed a set of rules for their mempool, which can be applied to analyze if a basically any contract interaction is somehow safe for the mempool. I have to preface this though to say that the mempool that was implemented for ERC 4337 is quite resource intensive. So I would not like to use it as the best possible example of it. But let me still go into detail a bit more to explain how this works. So basically, for the account abstraction to be viable in the mempool, there are two strategies. One of them is basically acknowledging that the full generality that account abstraction allows basically requires a very complicated mempool. And this is what this ERC represents. It basically gives you a full set of rules where if you implement that, you can judge any transaction to see if once it matches these rules, it is safe to include in the mempool. But you do also have to trace the execution steps of the transaction to validate these rules. So basically, these are rules like if this opcode is followed by this opcode with this parameter, then the transaction is invalid, basically. So it is good to have this rule set, and I think it's quite an achievement that they got very far with it because it allows to build a general mempool for all account abstraction transactions. At the same time, this is not the mempool that we would want to see included in like the full nodes. And I don't think it's very likely that this will ever happen. What we will be doing instead is basically with the frame transaction idea is that we develop the frame transaction specifically so that the protocol implementation has an insight into what the user is trying to achieve with their transaction by inspecting the frame structure. And also, in some ways, it allows to implement more strict mempool policies that only allow a subset of transactions to be accepted into the public mempool as we know it today. And in practice, this is how I think the mempool will work with EIP 8141. For the node implementations, we will come up with a guidance document that explains like a minimal set of rules that allows some useful subset of transactions to be submitted to the public mempool. But then there will also be third-party mempools which implement different rules or more complicated rules. And anyway, the goal of EIP 8141 is primarily just to allow these like arbitrary transactions with any kind of like approval interaction to be included in a block, because this means that ultimately it is up to the block building community to figure out like how like all of these flows can be optimally supported. And for example, in the L2 world, where most L2s use a sequencer, they actually have the capability to introspect transactions in a better way. So they can have different policies than, for example, a public Ethereum mainnet full node can have. And so this is the other reason why we do not specify all the rules directly in EIP 8141, because there is just no one set of rules that works for everyone. It is like a nuanced thing. Okay, sorry, it was kind of a long text, but I hope you guys.
Yeah, I understand it. So my question is, should we make it a headliner, which we want, without polishing those rules for public Ethereum mainnet mempool? And
I mean, we
I'm not sure.
will definitely. I mean, we have created some examples already in the EIP that show you, for example, the frame structures of certain transactions. For example, if you just want to transfer, like if you just want to do a simple balance transfer, it is actually more involved with the frame transaction than it is with, for example, a simple 1559 transaction, because you have to. So we have created some frame structures there that can show you, okay, this is approximately what this can look like. And also, obviously, it depends a lot on, for example, which signatures verification scheme is in use and how much. We have been stressing this point quite often, that there is also this ability to set the validation gas. Because if you think about the mempool, how it works right now, the mempool basically performs a signature validation on every transaction. In most clients, this is cached somehow, but basically, one time when the transaction is received new, it has to verify the signature of this transaction to make sure that the sender is correctly identified. And so, yeah, this doesn't really change. But like in the 8141, obviously, it says the sender address is directly a part of the transaction, but it's not proven. So in order to prove it, you have to spend some amount of gas to determine that. In the public mempool, we will assume that every node will have some amount of validation gas, which it is willing to expend to perform this check. And we think that this will become quite an important thing. We have not fully finished our experiments for this either. Like, we are still working towards like figuring out what are going to be these limits, what are going to be these rules. Like, this is for us also a big part of the work that lies ahead in the coming year. And this is also why fundamentally the Geth team is working so much on these changes, because we feel like we have a good understanding of the public mempool. And this is kind of why we took over this account abstraction thing, because we feel like, yeah, the mempool is kind of the primary challenge here. And yeah, I mean, we don't have all the answers right now. Definitely, it's a bit unfortunate, but we have to propose the headliner a year before the, fork. So we have to just. There will be more.
Okay, exactly. I agree. So that's why we propose to make it a non-headliner EAP and go this path, because of these uncertainties. That was exactly our point.
Okay, well, I mean, I can't really argue with that. Anyway, I'm pretty happy that you understand my points and like why we chose to work on it. Ben, you also have your hand up, or is it resolved?
Yeah, I was just going to say, so potentially, ultimately, you'd be in a situation where to accept transactions, you'd have to be invoking the EVM in the transaction pool to decide whether it's a valid transaction.
Yeah, I mean, that's kind of a part of it, yeah. But then there's the question, like, what can the EVM do, and like, what do you allow the EVM to do in this environment? Like, it is definitely a new environment for the EVM. Like, the EVM has not run in the transaction pool before. So in this case, we are treating the EVM as more like, yeah, like an arbitrary function, basically.
Yeah, I think it's fair to say you have to introspect the EVM instructions in the transaction. You don't need to necessarily. I think part of the crafting of the rules was so that for certain of them you don't need to execute. You can just inspect.
There are various ways to do it. There is, for example, also the possibility of allow listing certain contracts because they are known to be safe. So, for example, if you know that a certain account contract has a specific semantics, you can just model these semantics in native code and then apply this model in your transaction pool. Then you don't have to run the EVM. Or there are various other ideas that can basically save you some of these more expensive evaluations. So it is kind of an open area, but we feel like fundamentally the goal of the frame transaction is to make it actually possible to do this, because we will, over time, I already foresee it, be adding more and more things to this transaction to allow the protocol to kind of introspect ahead of time what is like the validation intent of this transaction. And we already kind of have it now with the verify frames, so it's pretty clear to the transaction pool, for example. This is the reason why verify frames exist in this proposal, so that the mempool can say, okay, the verification is in this exact call. and this call has this much gas. So it can right away say, yeah, I mean, it's trying to use way too much gas for the verification. I'm not even going to start executing that, for example. So it's not like you have to run the EVM to the full extent for every single transaction. You only have to run it like when it seems like it's going to have any chance at actually validating, for example. Anyways, it's going really deep now, but I feel like these discussions are valuable because this proposal seems to be heavily misunderstood sometimes.
It might also be worth mentioning this. Oh yeah, I was gonna say Frederick's point, but Frederick, you can say it.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, I just want to say that there is this other aspect of it as well, which is revolving around end user security. And one of the things that we've seen and heard a lot from end users is that they are losing quite a bit of funds through various types of hacks, scams, and drainers and other means. And one thing that can solve this is, or at least one part of solving this kind of problem that end users are facing, which in some ways driving people away from using blockchain technology because once they lose all their funds through a scam, they're not super happy to continue transacting. So one of the things that we can do is to implement something like transaction assertions, which will allow people to basically, or wallets to provide certain assertions that needs to be true for the transaction to go through and otherwise revert. So if a user believes that they will receive token X and the transaction is actually doing something else, then the transaction would revert and they would not end up losing their funds. And this is something that frame transactions could solve pretty nicely from the looks of it, which is why I am personally pretty excited about it. And I think it will have a very big positive impact on the user ecosystem.
I feel like if we don't make frame transactions the headliner here, it's going to be harder to build things like this on top of it because we don't want to accept, multiple non-headliners that are dependent on each other. Then we create like a large risk profile for, one of them not shipping, causing a cascading failure of the fork.
Okay, so we are 10 minutes before the end of the call. I do think I want to at least actually try to make a decision today. So just another check. How are people feeling? I did see in chat that say on the Nethermind team, maybe there's just kind of different opinions, but it did seem like the team overall was still pointing more towards no headliner. Yeah, it seems hard. I mean, obviously we could just not make a decision, but I don't see what would improve by 2 weeks from now that would allow us to then make a decision. And the cost of course, delaying these types of decisions is high. So I'm very hesitant to pay that cost unless there's a specific reason why we would think that there will be significant resolution within those 2 weeks. And otherwise, it just feels very hard to accept a headliner with such significant client skepticism. So I think the clear default decision here would be to just not accept it as a headliner. I just don't really see yeah what else
It
again,
feels
like
like
just
a
process
couple of
wise, I don't
clients are
yeah.
in favor of adding as a headliner, and then even Lucas is saying now he doesn't know for certain and doesn't want to block it. Like there is risk in changing Ethereum, there always is, but like part of having the governance decisions now early means that we can try to minimize that risk a lot by iterating on this rather than continuing to spend time figuring out what we're going to even do with the fork.
Okay, but I mean, so right now, I don't think, unless again, over the next 5 minutes, there's still more change. I don't think we're in a position to accept frame transactions as headliners, just because right now there's 2 clients in favor and then a little bit of openness, but uncertainty from some of the other clients. That's not enough of a basis. I do think we could say we wait 2 more weeks if people think, like Barnabas was proposing it in chat, for example, yeah, because it is really on the edge, I'm open to that. I would want to get the feeling that at least the majority of clients would prefer delaying that decision. Then I think we can do that. Yeah. But then again, like I think the understanding for 2 weeks from now would be that, yeah, the default would be to not accept it as a headliner. So things would have to tilt more in the direction of headliner support for it to make a difference. Ben?
I'd just like to call out what Felix said in chat. I think that's interesting. Maybe promoting it to headliner later.
Well, we don't really have a process for that. I personally am always leaning on the side of like some flexibility with processes. This seems like it would be bending the process quite a bit, which I definitely don't feel like prepared to say that that's going to be possible today. I mean, obviously, we could discuss this and see maybe over the next 2 weeks decide whether that's something we would be willing to do. But yeah, I feel like it's a bit tricky to just impromptu make such big changes to processes.
Well, I mean, it's the no headliner gambit.
What's that?
Well, as in, if we don't have a headliner, then it may not be a situation covered by process.
Sure. Yeah, Ahmad?
Yep. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah. So I wanted to just like surface that the Nethermind team is split among this. Some think that it shouldn't be a headliner, but some of us think that we like it as a headliner. Just to be clear about that. I also noticed or heard similar feedback from Bezo, but I might be wrong. And we know that Geth and Reth are Geth and Aethrex are supporting. So doesn't it seem like most consensus is saying they support it as a headliner, or am I understanding this incorrectly?
I think you guys would need to have to get off the fence. I think is what the situation is. I mean, I guess the question is, what would it take to persuade you that it's a good idea? Maybe that's the question that we should ask. Because that's the only way that will take the process forward. Because presumably there's some definable reason why it shouldn't be for people who are saying no. Maybe we need to understand what those issues are and address them.
So for me, definitely, some kind of rules that are acceptable by everyone, like the consensus on the rules around the transaction pool that is on the one hand not DOSable and works in a reasonable way, on the other hand has reasonable usability, which I'm not, I'm not sure if it's easy to achieve both.
So does that just require because the EFAA guys have spent quite a lot of time on that. Have you looked at what they've proposed?
Well, not completely, and Felix says they already kind of have a bit different idea for the frame transactions.
Yeah, I just wanted to quickly highlight again that like there is two different things here. So we're talking about this rule set, which is also cited within EIP 8141. And this rule set is giving this, basically we are citing this rule set because we feel like it is a very comprehensive way of analyzing the behavior of the frame transaction. I don't think we are going to apply all of this rule set in every client. It's just not possible. We have to come up with like a simpler rule set. And this is still being worked on right now. I mean, one of the key things is that we do not actually have like the account implementations like fully worked out. That's a whole other thing, because the account implementations are technically something that can is arbitrary in this proposal, right? At the same time, maybe one thing I can also highlight is that recently there was this default account added into the EIP, and the default account definitely is kind of a bigger change. So it means that like all of the existing EUAs get some features added, like gas sponsoring and native batching and things like that. Possibly even the ability to do different types of signatures. Like there's a lot of things in the EIP now that were added all at once with this default account. This is also still something being worked on. But then the thing is that like once this is in, then it's like the question like these like public mempool rules definitely should permit using the default account. And then they'd be like the thing is that we are proposing this EIP now with some ideas, and we have pretty good ideas about like the space of it, but the absolute details, like there is still some things that are being worked on. We're not presenting a fully finished design that has like every little corner worked out. That's just not how the process works. We have to provide the EAP early on so that it can be worked on during the fork cycle. We cannot just like finish everything and then present it. That it doesn't work like that with other EAPs either. Like most EAPs get proposed, and then once it comes to time to actually implement it, then all the changes come. So that's also how I see it with this one. I mean, we have a pretty good idea how this can all work, but it still requires the work.
Okay, so with 2 minutes left, then it does sound like, well, I'm usually always like, I don't like delaying decisions. I'm sometimes guilty of it, but it feels like in chat also, it seemed like there wasn't really anyone pushing for a decision today, and several people suggesting that we should decide, we should wait for 2 more weeks, just given that it seems to be so on edge. Yeah, so then I do think the right decision here is to say we make the final decision on whether to have frame transactions as headliner or not 2 weeks from now. By that time, we then also will have some more information on we can see if there's anything else process-wise that would be an option or anything. Default outcome again, I think, would be to not select it as a headliner. So, just people should have that as a mindset. But I think we are not far away from enough client support to change that. Yeah. So, and then I think it's on the frame transaction champions to maybe set up some sort of one more breakout call or something like this between now and then to
Yeah,
finalize
which
that.
it seems like needs to focus on the usability in the mempool, or the ability to build something in the mempool at least a minimum that's actually practical, because that seems to be where the questions are.
Yeah,
so maybe that's what the breakout should address.
It seems reasonable for this to at least be a big focus. And yeah, Matt also asked in chat, and then I think let me put it this way: I think ideally anyone who has some specific questions or concerns or thought that they would want addressed, do reach out to the champions. Also, ideally we have an agenda item issue open where people can comment questions, topics they want to have addressed in advance. Let's try to make the most out of this so we can make an informed decision, because I feel like we should not end up having this be a coin flip. I think ideally by 2 weeks from now we have a clear decision where everyone is behind, and we can actually, I think that's best for Ethereum. Usually coin flips are not great. So let's try to get there in 2 weeks. And then one last comment there, I think also in terms of non-headliners, there's the question already. At the moment we log in the headliner decisions, we can open up the proposing window for non-headliner EIPs, and then we will communicate kind of specific deadlines there around by when do non-headliners have to be proposed. Yeah, at a later point, either 2 weeks from now or 4 weeks from now, we'll communicate the specific deadlines there. So look out for this, but basically you can prepare, like you can prepare to drop your non-headliner proposals starting next call basically. Okay. With that, we're also running up on time. We had a few more agenda items on the agenda, but I think I'll just bump them to 2 weeks from now and leave it at that. Awesome. Thank you, everyone, and talk to you all in 2 weeks.
Thanks.